Good evening, dear brothers and sisters, dear parishioners of Our Lady of Pentecost Parish. Thank you for inviting me to give this evening's recollection on the topic Gifted to Give on the occasion of the 500th year of Christianity. I just want to begin by giving you the biblical inspiration for the theme Gifted to Give. It comes from Matthew chapter 10, verse 8b, the second half of the verse. And take note that this is from the mission discourse in the Gospel of St. Matthew. It is part of the instruction of Jesus to his apostles when he sends them out on a mission. He says, "Without cost you have received, without cost you are to give." Well, this is going to be a 5-part reflection. The first is going to be on the theme itself, Gifted to Give. The second is on the gift of the Christian faith to the Philippines. The third has to do with the 4 encounters that took place in 1521 as narrated by Pigafetta. The events that took place within 46 days when Magellan came to these islands. The fourth is the follow-up that took place in 1565, and then, fast forward, 2021, 500 years later. Let us begin immediately with the theme, Gifted to Give. Like I said, it comes from the mission discourse of the Gospel of Matthew. Without cost you have received, without cost you are to give. Meaning, Jesus is defining for us a gift as that which you receive without cost. That is what it means to be gifted. You received without cost. And as that also which you give without cost. And that is what the second part is about, gifted to give. Well, we have to make clear that it is not a gift when the receiver has to pay for it, or it is not a gift when the giver demands payment for it. It is not a gift when the giver expects something in return, or when the receiver feels entitled to the gift. You don't call that a gift. Maybe you will call it a reward or a payment, but don't call it a gift. It is a gift when the receiver feels grateful for it, not entitled to it, grateful for it, and is thereby motivated to reciprocate by sharing it. Take note, I am not denigrating, the value of quid pro quo, something for something. Meaning, an equivalent amount of goods in exchange for merchandise, for example, that is not bad in itself. To demand or to expect just payment or just compensation for goods and services, there's nothing essentially bad about that. That is part of human business and human transactions. But let's make it clear, that is not what gift is about. It is not a gift when the giver has a hidden agenda or an ulterior motive for the giving, or when the receiver is held captive by the giver through the gift, the so-called gift. Kailangan, we must call a spade a spade. Hindi lahat ng tinatawag na regalo ay regalo. Not all gifts are gifts. I realized this very early in my life because my late father served as an assistant to the chief prosecutor of Metro Manila. And ang prosecutor or ang piskal usually would decide on the merit of the case, meaning would establish what they call probable cause, kung iaakyat ba o hindi sa korte. And many times, people attempted to send gifts to my late father. And I do remember how offended he felt whenever they sent gifts. Parang I didn't understand that at the start. Only later did I learn to distinguish between what is called a gift and what is a bribe. Not all gifts are gifts. If it is given for a price or in exchange for something, then it is not a gift. It is a commodity or a merchandise for sale or for barter. If it is given with a hidden agenda, that is even worse. Kung minsan, the agenda can be economic or political or sometimes even a sexual agenda. Then, if it is given with a hidden agenda, it is not a gift. It is a trap. It is a bait. There is an old saying, I'm sure you're familiar with it, beware of the Greeks bearing gifts. Well, I do not mean to be racist when I say that. It's just a quotation that has a literary background, and I am sure you know the literary background to it. The Trojan horse, the Trojan horse. When they sent that Trojan horse, they really thought it was a gift, not realizing that it was a trap. So let's now move to the second part, the gift of the Christian faith. Having established what a gift is supposed to be already from the mindset of Jesus himself, then maybe let us reflect on what we call now the gift of the Christian faith. One of the issues is, was Christianity a gift or a mere tool for colonial rule? I am sure not everyone will agree with us about celebrating 2021 or commemorating 1521. In fact, there are some historians who would simply say, oh, come on, the Christianity brought by the Spaniards was just a tool for colonial rule. Well, maybe if you agree that Christianity was nothing but a tool, a political tool, or a tool for colonial rule, then maybe, if that is how you look at it, then you will not regard it as a gift. You will probably talk about Christianity as something similar to the Trojan horse, But the question is, how come? How come we eventually got rid of the Spanish colonial rule, but we kept the Christian faith? How come? That could only mean that even the natives of these islands learned to distinguish between faith and politics, I mean, they were not dumb people. They were also intelligent, and I am sure they were also discerning the movements of these strangers who came to these islands. I think they also distinguished between the political agenda of the colonists and the evangelizing mission of the missionaries. Of course, they came together. That is why it is easy to equate them with one another, the colonists and the missionaries. We ended up rejecting the politics, but we kept the faith. And for me, that could only mean we recognized it as a gift. And we recognize this as a gift not from Spain, but as a gift from God. Maybe through Spain, but not from Spain, because we kicked out Spain after all, after we had a revolution against Spanish colonial rule. And so we need to clarify 500th year of what? Because we're saying we're celebrating 500th year of Christianity. What is it about 1521 that we are commemorating? Well, I would like to put it very simply. It's the 500th year since the first contact of the natives of these islands that would later be called the Philippines with Christians or with Christianity. With Christians from Spain and Portugal in the person of Magellan and all who were part of the Magellan Expedition of 1521. And so, are we going to say 2021 is the 500th year of evangelization? That's another touchy issue for some church historians even. But I would dare say, yes, why not? 500 years somehow of evangelization, but with a lot of qualification on the significance of what exactly happened in 1521. Because we celebrated 1965 as the 400th year of evangelization. That was to commemorate 1565, the 1565 Legaspi Expedition. And that expedition came with the first group of Augustinian missionaries with the express mandate to evangelize. And this group departed not from Spain, by the way, but from Mexico, which was then called New Spain or La Nueva España. The 1521 Magellan Expedition had no such mandate to engage in evangelizing mission. Like I said, they departed from Spain, while the 1565 departed from New Spain or Mexico. And the objective of the Magellan Expedition was not really to evangelize, but to find a new westward route to the Moluccas, the Spice Islands. And by the way, it's important to note that all the members of the crew were Christians. They were all Christians. Majority of them were lay Christians. Maybe Portuguese Christians, Spanish Christians, or Italian even, like the chronicler Pigafetta was Italian, but also a Christian, with the exception of one ordained priest. Well, historians tell us there were other priests, but they perished. They did not arrive in these islands with Magellan. So, isa lang yung pari nila, Father Pedro de Valderrama, acting as the chaplain of the expedition. And who is Magellan? Well, Magellan was a Christian Portuguese captain who transferred political loyalty from Portugal to Spain in exchange for the financing of his experimental westward voyage to the Moluccas. He was trying to get the support of the Portuguese monarch, but he didn't get it. And so he defected from the Portuguese king and, became loyal to the Spanish monarchy because it was the Spanish monarch that financed the expedition. He was the very first to propose to follow the opposite routes, not the eastward route, but the westward route through the Pacific Ocean, in order to reach the Moluccas, the Spice Islands. And so he succeeded in a way because he was the first European to reach Asia through the South Pacific Ocean. Before Magellan, nobody else has attempted to do that. That is why the whole strait is named after Magellan. Who is Magellan again? Well, let's call a spade a spade. He was not a missionary. He was a mercenary. And he was doing this for pay, But there is something that puzzles me about Magellan's behavior when he came to these islands. He suddenly shifted to being a missionary when he met the natives of Samar, Leyte, and Cebu. Kaya, sometimes, I ask myself the question, what was in the mind of Magellan? That was not his work. That wasn't his business in these islands. What was in his mind? What got into him that made him shift from mercenary work to missionary work? My only answer to that is your guess is as good as mine. Of course, the typical question would be, baka naman he was doing it for an economic or political agenda. Well, siguro. Remember, his true destination was the Moluccas. They were just passing through. So what motivated him to sort of behave like a missionary? And I will explain to you in what way he shifted somehow from being mercenary to missionary in his dealings with the natives of Samar, Leyte, and Cebu. So, as I said, he was just passing through. And to the natives, the first natives who met with the expedition of Magellan, these people from faraway Europe were just strangers. What were they? They were plain strangers who came and were in dire needs. Sila yung nangangailangan. Imagine, they had just crossed the South Pacific Ocean and survived it. When they left, there were 5 ships, but only 3 of the ships survived. One got shipwrecked, and the other deserted them. And halfway through the voyage, there was even a mutiny. That's why Magellan even had to execute some of these rebellious members of the expedition. Several of them died. They weren't able to last through the journey. Many of them, when they arrived, were very sick. They were tired, weary, and sea-beaten. They were hungry and thirsty. And, they needed new provisions in order to reach their real destination, which was the Moluccas. So, dumadaan lang sila. They were just passing through. And before they actually reached the islands we now call the Philippines, they passed through the Marianas Islands. But they were immediately unwelcome there, They were met with bows and arrows by the Chamorros. And so when they arrived in the Visayas and Upper Mindanao, they were very afraid. They were anxious, They were not sure kasi nakikita nila that the natives of these islands, and they saw that some islands were quite well inhabited, populated, busy islands. But they were not sure, and they saw that many of these people were tattooed natives, Would these natives be friendly or hostile? I'm sure they were afraid. Would they provide them temporary shelter? Would they be kind or unkind to them? Well, in Tagalog, you would call the situation of Magellan's expedition nakikipanuluyan. You remember what we dramatized during Christmas, ang pakikipanuluyan ng Sagrada Familia. They were in search of a shelter in their time of need. Evangelization can happen only in the context of dialogue. And in Filipino, if you are seeking shelter, you present yourself as a human being. In fact, when we knock at the door, that is what we say, tao po, tao po. And if the homeowner is convinced that you are really tao, he would say, tuloy po. So this is the dynamics that took place between Magellan's crew and the natives of these islands. I would think of Magellan as strangers, His company, his group, was a group of strangers na nakikipanuluyan and kailangan kumatok ka, magpakatao ka. These are the basic rules for strangers seeking shelter and for the prospective hosts who are, of course, naturally cautious because they do not know yet what your objective is. So in Tagalog, we would say, magpakatao ka. And what is the best expression of pagpapakatao? Makipagkapwa-tao ka. And I'd like to propose that evangelization begins with that. That evangelization cannot be true, cannot be real, if it doesn't begin with magpakatao at makipagkapwa-tao. You remember, even in the story of St. Luke, on the infancy narrative, the Holy Family was unwelcome, They came as unwelcome strangers, but they were seeking shelter, and no one would open their doors to them except the lowly shepherds. And when finally they find shelter in the company of the lowly shepherds, Luke tells us that the angels in heaven sang the Gloria. And the angels said, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will. Meaning, the lowly who respond with goodwill, they are the very first to receive the good news. That is how the gospel is laid out in the Gospel of St. Luke. The goodwill of the lowly shepherds, which, the goodwill of opening a door to strangers who are in need. Evangelization begins with that. It begins with a basic exchange of goodwill in dialogue. And goodwill is the only fertile ground for the seeds of the good news of the kingdom of God. Let me repeat that. Goodwill is the only fertile ground for the seeds of the good news. I think that is what Luke is trying to insinuate with the angels singing, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace." Peace to people of goodwill. These people of goodwill are the recipients of the good news. Now, let's go straight to the 500th year of Christianity in the Philippines. We celebrate the 500th year, meaning 2021 is the 500th year of becoming a field for the seeds of the gospel. How the seeds of the Christian faith were sown by God through the instrumentality of European Christians who were both flawed and holy, sinful and saintly, missionaries and mercenaries. Magellan is usually credited for discovering the Philippines. From the mercenary point of view, we might say he discovered a potential colony for the Spanish monarchy whom he was working for. And from the missionary point of view, what I believe he discovered was a fertile ground for the seeds of the Christian faith. Kaya lang, we cannot separate Magellan, the mercenary, and the Magellan, the missionary. It's one human being. And that is the case with all of us. We are always a mixture of saints and sinners. Now, let me move to the 4 important encounters so that we will be able to situate in these 4 encounters where we might believe the fertile ground of goodwill was laid out and became open or welcoming to the seeds of the gospel. So, we're going to highlight the 4 important encounters that took place in 1521. And nangyari po lahat ng ito within 46 days because remember, they arrived on March 16, 1521, but they departed on May 1, 1521. Then the departure was not very pleasant. So 4 encounters. First with the fishermen from Samar. The second is the encounter with the 2 brothers, the chieftain Kulambu of Limasawa and Siagu of Butuan. And the third is the encounter with the chieftain of Cebu, Raha Humabon. And lastly, the tragic encounter with the chieftains of Mactan. And I'm talking about Sula and Lapu-Lapu. Unfortunately, most of us know only Lapu-Lapu. Many of you probably never heard about Sula, but he is an important figure who would make you understand what really happened in Lapu-Lapu. I don't even want to call what happened in Lapu-Lapu a battle. I would rather call it an ambush. An ambush. Okay, now we talk about the first encounter. This happened on March 18, 1521 at Homonhon Island in Samar. Meaning, Magellan, they had arrived, but they were not coming out of their ship. They moored their ship, quite a distance from an island because they're observing around. They had already seen Limasawa, but because they saw that it was very populated, umiwas sila. They avoided it and went to a less populated island, and that's Homonhon, which happened to have 2 springs, by the way, and they were looking for fresh water. And they were surprised. They were in the ship, and suddenly there was this boat, this bangka, with 9 fishermen approaching the ship. Natural, suddenly they felt afraid because, they were thinking that they might be attacked by these natives. That's why they were already holding on to their swords. But, Magellan told his men to put down their swords. When he noticed that these men, they were just plain fishermen, that they were just curious. They were approaching the ship, and they probably wanted to know who was in the ship. And Magellan welcomed them in the ship. And they were pleasantly surprised that Magellan was very nice to them. He served them food, and he gave gifts to them, some tokens, red cap, a looking glass, combs, bells, ivory, little things, little trinkets, And apparently, the native fishermen were very happy that they were treated in a friendly way by these strangers. So what do? The fishermen, because they're touched by the warm and the friendly demeanor of Magellan, they reciprocated. They also gave gifts. Meron din pala silang dala. They were bringing some gifts of fish, palm wine, tuba, fruits, and coconuts. And of course, they were raving about the coconuts because they were delicious. And these people were longing for fresh water. They had not drunk, real fresh water, and now they're drinking delicious coconut juice, You will keep hearing about coconut juice. It became a token of friendship between Magellan's men and the natives. So, after that first brief encounter, on March 22, 4 days later, as promised, the natives came back in 2 boats with more coconuts and oranges, dalandan, tuba, and they were even bringing a rooster down. And so Magellan felt more comfortable, with the natives. They not only moored close to the island, they actually went to the island, and they sought the assistance of the natives there to attend to their sick companions. Nagtayo pa nga siya ng tolda, a tent, in order to attend to their sick companions. And they got fresh water from the springs in Homonhon Island. Now we talk about the second encounter. The second encounter took place on March 28 with 2 chieftains, Colombo of Limasawa and Siago Butuan. Now, first Colombo. So, Colombo was in a boat and he approached the ship. Just like the first encounter, he was in a boat. And Magellan, also responded in a friendly way. He was asking Colombo to get into the ship, but Colombo stayed in his boat and asked some of his men to enter the ship. But he was very formal, meaning he was very cautious. He was trying to play it by ear. Magellan, gave gifts, but Colombo tried to maintain his dignity. And you know what Colombo did? When his men came down and they were bringing tokens given by Magellan, binabayaran ni Colombo. He was bringing a bar of gold and a basket of ginger according to Pigafetta. Meaning, parang sinasaway niya itong mga tauhan niya dahil nagkakandara pa doon sa mga regalo ni Magellan. So, he gave payment. He was trying to pay them. And how did Magellan react to that? He declined the payment, meaning he wanted to make it clear they were gifts. And somehow, that broke the ice. So, on March 29, on Good Friday, Magellan sent Enrique to the island in order to buy some provisions. And Colombo visited them, reciprocated the visit. So Magellan sent people to the island. By the way, I should tell you about Enrique. Si Enrique, he was the slave of Magellan. And this slave was a native of Malacca, meaning he was a Malay, And this Malay was serving as an interpreter to them. Kaya I would wonder if they really understood each other to the interpretation of Enrique, because it's like making a Cebuano and a speaker of Bahasa Indonesia talk to each other. No, they probably understood about 50% or 40%, but I do not think they understood each other really 100%. At least it's a lot better than communicating between the Malays and the Spaniards. No. So, Colombo visited them in the ship, and this time he entered the ship. He did not stay in the boat, and he was bringing gifts. He was bringing gifts of cooked rice on china dishes and cooked fish as well, and other good things, food. And the captain, showed gratitude. He was so touched by the gesture of welcome. He reciprocated with more gifts, and he even served refreshments in the ship. And then Colombo invited them to the island. He tried to explain to them that Homonhon was just a hunting ground for these two chieftains, that Siagu was really from Butuan, and in fact, he's called a Moor, by the way. I wonder if he was a Muslim. And Colombo was the chieftain of Limasawa. So he invited them over to Limasawa, and he prepared a friendly banquet for them. And Pigafetta would be raving about the friendly meals that they were having together. Natulog pa nga sila doon, overnight stay, and then they returned to their ship. Next, Siagu, the brother of Colombo, would visit Magellan. Again, it would be a friendly encounter. The climax of the first two encounters is actually the first Mass at Limasawa on Easter Sunday of 1521. And that happened on March 31. You might be wondering why the CBCP has proposed to celebrate or to inaugurate our 500th year of Christianity to commemorate the first Mass on April 4. Well, because March 31 in 1521 was an Easter Sunday. Ang sinicelebrate po natin is not the date, but the day, the significance of the day, which was an Easter Sunday. And that Easter Sunday was also the occasion for the first encounter of the natives with the first Christian icon, which is the planting of the cross. So, let's review what happened in this this climax of the first two encounters. So, the gestures of friendship, happened really on March 31, 1521, on that first Mass. Si Colombo, Raha Colombo, and his brother Raha Siagu assisted them in constructing a platform as a venue for the Mass. Because Magellan told them that they were celebrating a very important occasion, for the Christian faith, and that they wanted a place where they could worship. And Colombo and Siagu said, of course, we will help you. And so they assisted them. Nagtayo sila ng platform. And not only did they do that, they slaughtered 2 pigs as gift for their newfound friends. They were really treating Magellan and his companions as friends. And not only did they do all of that, they even joined them in their celebration of the Mass. And Pigafetta was saying they found it a bit amusing that, they were doing, sabi niya, what we were doing. Like, there was a ritual that we did when we kissed the cross, they also kissed the cross. When we knelt at the consecration, they also knelt at the consecration and even folded their hands. I am sure that was a gesture of friendship as far as Colombo and Siagu and his families were concerned. Meaning, it was a sign or a show of respect for the faith of these guests who were strangers, whom they were assisting. And then Magellan said, we would like to plant a symbol, and we'd like it to be a kind of a token of our friendship, and it's the cross. And Siagu and Colombo said, oh, that would be wonderful. Yes, we will assist you. tinulungan sila. They tried to find the highest point of the island where they could plant the cross. Now the third encounter. So first, the fishermen of Samar. Second, Colombo and Siagu in Limasawa. The third encounter, now in Cebu, with Raha Humabon. And this took place on April 7. Kasi the occasion was this. The Kapitan, when I say Kapitan, I'm talking about Magellan. The Kapitan said to Colombo, you know, with all due respect, I'm happy, that you have been assisting us, helping us, even providing food for us, but we need more food. And we don't want to burden you too much. Sabi niya, is there a place or a port here for trading where we could get more provisions? Because we are on our way to the Moluccas and we need more provisions. And of course, not only to Moluccas, we have to return to Spain. So that will require a lot of food and drink. And Raha Colombo said, oh yes, yes. You go to Cebu. Cebu is a very busy port. And if you want, I will even accompany you. And he did. On April 7, Colombo introduced Magellan to Raha Humabon of Cebu. And Raha Humabon was very formal, Raha Humabon was very businesslike. Of course, the one who was doing all the interpreting so that they could communicate well was actually the interpreter, Enrique. And through Enrique, Magellan tried to negotiate, And I don't know if Enrique had the permission, of Magellan in everything that he was saying. But Enrique went out of his way, to insist to Humabon that they should not be made to pay the port tax of Cebu. Humabon was saying, you are strangers here, you're visitors, you're bringing merchandise, you have to pay a port tax. And Enrique, on behalf of Magellan, said, if we are friends, why will you make us pay tax, And he says, if you waive the tax, the port tax, then we will promise you, protection from your enemies. And Humabon, said, that's good. So, nag-give in naman siya. Okay, now we're not talking about gifts anymore. We're talking about quid pro quo, You demand, to be given a special privilege. So, all right, I will give in to your request, but that will come with a price, And Humabon, for his part, started offering gifts. So he also expressed some friendship. And he welcomed them with a banquet. And they did a little bit of a ritual called the blood compact, which was for the natives a gesture of their friendship. So, it is expected that on both sides, parang pakiramdaman baga, they were trying to feel their way with each other, trying to see what is the gesture or token of friendship in their culture, And when Magellan saw that the gesture was an exchange of blood or a blood compact, then he submitted himself to it. And I'd like to believe that when the natives joined them in their own liturgy or religious celebration, it was for them also an expression, a token of friendship. April 9, Tuesday, Raha Colombo and Siagu, who is called the Moro, they assure the Kapitan that Humabon was preparing more food provisions for them as they requested. And take note, he is not supposed to be demanding it as a gift, but rather as merchandise. Meaning, Magellan was going to pay for it. So Humabon would prepare the food provision, but Magellan had to pay for it. Now, during that time, Pigafetta tells us that Magellan, who became really very friendly, in particular with Colombo and Siagu, began to induce them to become Christians. Ito na yung sinasabi kong the mercenary is starting to behave like a missionary. I would expect the priest to do that, si Pedro de Valderrama. But no, it's not the priest who does it. It's the Kapitan, Magellan. He tries to induce them to become Christians. And you know what they answered? And they were very nice, very kind. They said, if the Kapitan could send 2 men later on to teach us and to show us the Christian faith, we would be more than interested to listen. And the Kapitan was very pleasantly surprised that they showed interest in the Christian faith. And so, here is what Pigafetta narrates. Let me quote directly from him. And of course, when I read Pigafetta, I also take him with a grain of salt because I know that he is making this as a report to the king and trying to impress as well. Well, he said, each of us wept for the joy which we felt at the goodwill of these people. And the captain told them not to become Christians from fear of us or just to please us. But, sabi niya, if they wished to become Christian, they must do so willingly and for the love of God. For even though they should not become Christian, no displeasure would be done to them, would be done them. But those who became Christian would be more loved and better treated than others. This is, the narration of Pigafetta. Their reaction, parang it was so heartwarming on the part of these lay Christians, to realize that their friends were interested in their faith. And Magellan was actually now starting to induce them to become Christians. And the natives thou said, they cried out with one voice, they did not wish to become Christians only from fear, nor from complaisance, but of their free will. Well, let's take it, at its face value. This is Pigafetta trying to tell us that the natives, really responded very positively to the invitation to join the Christian faith. Then the captain thou, with tears in his eyes, embraced them. And after peace was concluded, the Kapitan had refreshments served to them. There, after peace had been concluded, I'd like to believe that this was being interpreted by the 2 brothers as some kind of a peace pact, a gesture or a sealing of a friendly relationship. Because remember, all of this is being mediated by an interpreter called Enrique. And so what follows is an exchange of gifts. Kulambu would prepare baskets of rice, pigs, goats, fowls, and he wasn't asking for payment for it. He was giving it as gift. And in fact, he was even saying, pasensya na kayo sa aming abang nakayanan. I found it very funny the way Pigafetta was describing the apologies being expressed by Kulambu, for his humble gifts. Please accept my humble gifts. And Magellan, of course, reciprocated it. What did he give for Kulambu? He gave fine cloth, red cap, glasses, cups of carved glass, and very precious things that they were bringing with them from Spain. And now, Pigafetta, got an idea from that because he saw that the dynamics between Magellan and Kulambu and Siagu was really, really very friendly. He was so enthused by that. And he went out of his way to suggest to the Kapitan, ano kaya, regaluhan mo din si Humabon ng Cebu. Kasi he seems to be a very important figure. And what did Magellan prepare? A Turkish-style robe of yellow and violet silk, red cap, fine pieces of glass, and a silver dish, according to Pigafetta. And Pigafetta explains to Humabon, through the interpreter Enrique, that, let me quote, it was not as a return for his present, which he had previously sent to the Kapitan, but he was giving this for the affection which he bore him. Did you notice that, no? Parang pakiramdaman talaga. Parang, when it is a gift, it should be a gift. When it is merchandise, it is a merchandise. Parang, it's gentleman's agreement. But it is the gift, usually, that seals the friendship. And Pigafetta is explaining on behalf of the Kapitan to Humabon, through the mediation of Enrique, the interpreter, hindi ito bayad, ha? At hindi rin namin ito ipapabayad, ha? Regalo ito. This is a token of our affection which we have for you. Meaning, Magellan is trying to be friendly with Humabon in the same way that he was very friendly with Colombo and his brother. On April 10, Wednesday, humingi ng pabor itong si Humabon. Humingi ng pabor itong si Magellan. Namatayan sila ng isang tao. And so Magellan talks to Humabon through the interpreter and he says, one of our companions died and we need your help. We would like to give him a decent Christian burial. And it was wonderful because Humabon responded positively. He helped them. And they also asked Humabon to secure the merchandise that they were intending to sell in Cebu. And that's when they explained to Humabon, since Cebu is a very busy port, there is a lot of buying and selling happening here, we would also do some selling because we have merchandise with us. Pero pwede bang ipakitago muna namin yung paninda namin sa iyong bahay? And Humabon says, oh yes, go ahead. And he had their merchandise secured. And Magellan dispatched 4 of his men to do the business of selling at a just price. And Pigafetta describes the Cebuanos this way. Let me quote him directly. Ang sabi niya, these people, they live with justice and good weight and measure, loving peace, and are people who love ease and pleasure. A nice description of the Cebuanos by Pigafetta na that Cebuanos live with justice and they do good business, meaning hindi nandadaya, good weight and good measure. And they're peace-loving and they also love ease and pleasure, easy life. On April 12, which was a Friday, nagtinda sila sa Cebu. At palitan, ang pagtitinda nila is, barter baga, For metal and iron and other big goods, they gave us gold, ang sabi ni Pigafetta. And for the other small and sundry goods, they gave us rice, pigs, goats, and other provisions. Kasi yun naman ang kailangan nila. I would call this barter. But, nagbabayad din sila ng ginto. They gave us 10 weights of gold for 14 pounds of iron. Wow, no? 10 weights of gold for 14 pounds of iron. So talagang it's business. It's business going on. On April 13, Saturday, humingi din ng tulong si Humabon. Kailangan daw nila ng scaffolding on an open space kasi sumang-ayon na si Colombo and his family, si Siago and his family na magpabinyag. So, he wanted to prepare a platform in Cebu and it was going to be celebrated, yung baptism, on the 3rd Sunday of Easter, and that fell on April 14, the following day. So, tinulungan naman sila. So, the climax of the 3rd encounter, which is with Humabon, in the company of Colombo and Siago, ito na yung first baptism. The baptism. And let me describe how this whole thing happened. Okay, April 14, Sunday. Actually, hindi man kasama si Humabon dapat eh. But Pigafetta writes, and let me quote Pigafetta, the captain and the king, and he's talking about Humabon, they sat on 2 chairs. And through the interpreter, the kapitan began to again incite Humabon to the faith of Jesus Christ. He did that earlier with Colombo and Siago. Now he is doing it right on the day of April 14, no? Trying to incite, sumama ka na rin, magpabinyag ka na rin. And he's talking to Raha Humabon. And the kapitan daw took Raha Humabon by the hand. Wow! Holding hands pa sila. And they walked about on the scaffolding. At sinabi pa sa kanya na he would give him the name Carlos because he's an important figure and the King of Spain is King Carlos. And his brother, he would name him Fernando. And Colombo would be named Juan. And his brother, yung Moro, will be named Cristobal, si Siago. No? Well, pumayag itong si Humabon. Pumayag si Humabon. And so, ang daming trabaho ni Father Pedro de Valderrama. Bibinyagan niya lahat ng mga taong ito. No? The quick way in which things developed, I am more inclined to believe that on the part of Humabon, it was really, he was looking at it as a peace pact. Na kung itong taong to, nagsubmit naman siya sa akin nung una sa isang blood compact, bakit hindi ako magsasubmit sa ritual nila? And he probably thought that yung pagbubuhos ng tubig is a bit like blood compact for them. He was trying to seal a friendship. Remember, wala pa talagang, catechism na nangyari dito. Father Pedro de Valderrama ended up baptizing first si Humabon and 49 other men in the morning. So, 50 katao. Next, si Humamay, itong tinawag na Juana, and 40 women, companions, in the afternoon. So, 50 sa umaga, 41 in the afternoon, that's 91 people within that particular Sunday. Di pa sila tapos, no? The total number of individuals that were baptized on April 14, wow! I cannot imagine how Pedro de Valderrama did all of it. 800 persons. Nagbinyag sila ng 800 persons on that third Sunday of Easter, April 14, men, women, and children. And the women were given Christian names. The wife of Humabon, si Humamay, ay tinawag na Juana. The wife of, or the daughter of Humabon was called Catalina, and the wife of Colombo was called Isabel. Now, the Santo Niño. Okay. Kung yung cross, the planting of the cross is associated with the first Mass at Limasawa on March 31, ito namang Santo Niño, gifting of the Santo Niño, is connected to the first baptisms on April 14, third Sunday of Easter. And let me quote directly from Pigafetta. Pigafetta says, during that time, they showed her, meaning si Humamay, wife of Humabon, an image of our Blessed Mother, of Our Lady, made of wood, holding her little child and a cross. After she was baptized, itong si Juana daw, begged them. Sabi ni Pigafetta, she begged us to give her the little wooden boy to put in place of her idols. Meaning, ang Santo Niño pala na ibinigay sa kanya was actually attached to the Madonna and child. She didn't want the whole Madonna and child, she only wanted the child. Kaya hinugot yung Santo Niño at siya ang binigay na regalo kay Juana because yun ang gusto niyang ilagay sa kanyang altar along, to put in place of her anitos. Now, within 8 days, from April 14 to 22, all the inhabitants of the island daw were baptized and some belonging to the neighboring islands. And by the way, Pigafetta knows the distinction between the Gentiles and the Moors. And I would understand this because of his Spanish background, Well, Pigafetta is Italian, but he's doing this for Spain. And you know that at some point in the history of Spain, quite a big part of their country was conquered by Muslims, by the Moors. So, ang sabi ni Pigafetta, in one of these islands, we planted a cross, and I think he's referring to Limasawa, because the people were Gentiles. If they had been Moros, ang sabi niya, they should have erected a column as a sign of hardness of heart, because the Moors, ang sabi niya, are more difficult to convert than the Gentiles. So, I am inclined to believe that most of the people they encountered were not Muslims, were not Moros. The only one that Pigafetta refers to as a Moro was the brother of Colombo, who is Siago, and who turned out to be very friendly and allowed himself also to be baptized. by Pedro de Valderrama. Let me continue reading Pigafetta. Let me quote him. Sabi niya, the Captain General went ashore every day. So after the baptism on April 14, every day, nagkakaroon na ng misa. And the Captain General went daw ashore in order to attend Mass on the same platform every day. And many daw of the newly baptized Christians attended the Mass. And the Kapitan, during the Mass, explained various points of our religion. Meaning, naging catechist ang Magellan. I find that a bit amusing, I'd expect that it would be Valderrama, but Pigafetta is telling us that the Kapitan himself was catechizing the newly baptized Christians from among the natives. Kasi wala naman sila talaga naiintindihan dito sa what baptism and Christianity was really all about. Ang bilis ng mga pangyayari, And then, sabi ni Pigafetta, one day, the queen came. Meaning, si Juana, the wife of Humabon. The captain on that occasion approved of the gift. Apparently, dumating si Humamay carrying the Santo Niño. She attended the Mass, and she was proudly showing the Kapitan the Santo Niño that she received as gift through Pigafetta. Of course, hindi naman yung galing kay Pigafetta. Siguro sabi niya, pinabibigay ni Kapitan, And when the Kapitan saw it, well, he affirmed. Ang sabi niya, I'm glad you like my gift, of the infant Jesus. And the Kapitan recommended to put the Santo Niño in place of her anitos because daw it was in remembrance of the Son of God. And Juana promised to do it. And she said she would take good care of the Santo Niño. Now let me move to the fourth encounter. Okay? Kaya tinatawag ko itong bittersweet because it was sweet, 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 and then suddenly it would turn very bitter. It will end up bitterly. And the fourth encounter will end up in tragedy because of two things. First, the treacherous gift. We're talking again about gifts, Beware of gifts. The treacherous gift of Sula, who was the other chieftain of Mactan. Ang Mactan pala was ruled not only by one chieftain. There was another chieftain. He was called Sula. And so the first is the treachery of Sula, and the second is the treachery of Enrique. Dahil sa galit niya, bumaliktad siya. And that caused the turnabout also of Raha Humabon. From a friend, he will become an enemy. Let me explain a little bit very quickly. On April 26, which was a Friday, Magellan met the son of Raha Sula. Apparently, Raha Sula of Mactan sent his son. And his son was bringing gifts. 2 kambing, goats, as gifts. There are some historians who suggest that maybe Raha Sula and Lapu-Lapu could have been Moros, meaning Muslims, because they were not bringing pigs. They were offering Magellan 2 goats. They were a token of friendship. And may padalang mensahe si Raha Sula. And here is the message. Take note, listen carefully. Message from Sula. If the Kapitan would send him the following night 1 boat full of men to give him assistance. Humihingi ng tulong si Sula. He would fight and subdue his rival Lapu-Lapu. Meaning, he was trying to give the Kapitan o Magellan the impression that he and Lapu-Lapu were actually enemies in the same island. And so, Magellan became overconfident. Yan mo yung divide and rule, they're not united after all. And 1/2 of this island will side with me because Raha Sula is on my side, And so, he was being invited daw, the following night to come to Mactan. with one boat full of men in order to meet with Sula so that they together would fight Lapu-Lapu. Ganun pala yung kwento. And Magellan would believe the invitation. And that very night, with only 60 armed men, they would arrive before dawn. And ang bababa at sasakay ng bangka, would only be 41 of his men. The rest would stay in the boat. So meaning 19 stayed in the boat and 41 went by bangkas in order to go to Mactan, presumably to meet with Sula. Nagpakita ba ang Sula? No. He wasn't there. Anong nakita nila? These are the troops of Lapu-Lapu. About 1,500 soldiers. They had created even trenches, So, how do we interpret this? I don't call it a battle. It's a trap. Ambush. Ambush. And Magellan, couldn't retreat anymore. He was trapped. It was too late for him to realize that he had been set up by this Sula of Mactan. It is not true, after all, that Sula and Lapu-Lapu were at odds with each other. He just sort of deceived him. And that led to the death of Magellan and 8 of his men. Ang casualties ni Magellan, on his side, 9 sila lahat-lahat, along with 4 of the men of Humabon of Cebu in Mactan. It was so tragic. They retreated. Pati si Pigafetta, he got wounded in that ambush, And Humabon saw when Magellan daw was killed. And Humabon wept bitterly for him, according to Magellan. And in the afternoon, the survivors, tried to ask for assistance from Humabon to plead with the people of Mactan kung pwede to, to exchange the body of the Kapitan because they had the cadaver, ang bangkay ni Kapitan and the 8 other men were there in Mactan. And Humabon mediated. And he tried to reason out with the people of Mactan that if you give us their bodies, they are willing to exchange them for merchandise. Isoli nyo lang. Ayaw. No, they wanted to keep Magellan and his companions as trophies, And, of course, that was a very tragic thing. They had to retreat, And when they retreated, wala na silang kapitan. And they had to elect new captains, and they elected 2. My interpretation for this is there is a rift between the Portuguese and the Spaniards among them. I think the Portuguese elected Duarte Barbosa, and the Spaniards elected Juan Serrano. And I don't think any one of them wanted to give in. So, ginawang dalawa ang kanilang kapitan, the Portuguese kapitan and the Spaniard kapitan, to replace the one kapitan, Magellan. Now, in the meantime, they encounter a problem with the slave Enrique. Kasi the slave Enrique, after Magellan died, talked to Barbosa and said, Sir, my master promised me that pag namatay siya, I could be liberated already. So please keep the promise of my master because I want to go back home to Malacca. And Barbosa says, nothing doing, no way. Yes, Magellan is dead, but his wife is still alive. You have to come with us all the way back to Spain because your new master is going to be the wife of Magellan. Naggalit siya, He felt really cheated. And because he felt so cheated, now he started to betray them. What would Enrique do? He would poison the mind of Humabon so that Humabon would turn against them. Here is now a shift, from being a facilitator of dialogue, he became a facilitator of conflicts. That is why on May 1, 1521, Humabon And this time, Humabon is acting very queerly, no? Humabon would invite them for dinner in Cebu. And 26 of them would attend, including the two new capitans, Serrano and Barbosa. I'm a little bit suspicious, that there is an inside conflict here, an inside job among the survivors, among the crew of Magellan. No? But anyway, that's another story altogether. So they are invited to dinner by Humabon. They do not realize that Humabon is going to poison them. Imagine si Humabon, who had been baptized as a Christian, now suddenly turning into their enemy. And Pigafetta is wondering, nilaso ng isip niya. He was such a friend. How could he suddenly overnight turn into an enemy? What is it that Enrique told him? At ang guess ni Pigafetta is, maybe he told him that, that these survivors among the men of Magellan would attack Cebu, and burn their homes, etc. Unahan mo na sila, things like this. I don't know. Yeah, your guess is going to be as good as mine. But the dinner turned out to be a trap. And fortunately, one of them was able to escape, and his name is Juan Carvalho. Well, there are a lot of complications that took place in the tragedy, but suffice it to say that this is what happened. So 46 days ito. 46 days ito. And in spite of the tragic ending, I cannot get myself to believe that there was no real friendship that was struck between Magellan's men and the natives. The fertile ground of goodwill, on which some seeds had been sown haphazardly, were just quickly mixed with the weeds of treachery, ill will, and hidden agenda. Remember what I say about gifts? Well, not all gifts are gifts. Some turned out to be, something like the Trojan horse. And now, let's talk about the 1565 expedition of Legaspi. I hope you understand that it is what happened in 1521 as reported to the King of Spain when they returned. And by the way, it was through the leadership of Elcano that they were able to return to Spain, But it would take, how many? Something like 44 years later, for a follow-up to be sent. I call the 1565 Expedition of Legaspi a follow-up to the Magellan Expedition. And take note, it is not being sent from Spain, but from Mexico. And they had a special mandate because they were sending missionaries. And in the Expedition of Legaspi, there would be a whole group of Augustinian missionaries, the first with the task to evangelize. And my inclination is the 1565 is really a conscious follow-up to 1521 because Pigafetta has narrated to them that they baptized. A whole island, about, first day, 800 people. That is quite a responsibility, So I think of 1565 as a follow-up to 1521. I call this the mission, And my question is, were some seeds of the gospel somehow successfully planted among those natives during those 46 days of their encounter with Magellan and companions in 1521? Well, returning now to the field idea, they are actually going back to the field with the hope that even if the wheat had been infected by the weeds, there is something to harvest. That's why I call the 1565 some kind of a follow-up, because they were aware na kahit paano, even if done haphazardly and it ended tragically, they did try to evangelize. They did try to baptize people. And these are now a responsibility of the Spanish Christians, Back to the idea of being gifted to give. What is the gift? the gift is the Christian faith. Like I said, if you really believe that the Christian faith was nothing but a tool for colonial rule, then you will really not consider it a gift. But I also asked, di ba? If it was just a tool of colonial rule, how come we got rid of the colonial politics of the colonial ruler and we kept the Christian faith? Well, for me, that could only mean the Christian faith was really regarded by the natives of this country as a gift. The gift is the Christian faith that has been sown like grains of wheat, albeit by flawed workers. And parati naman ganun, di ba? There are no perfect Christians. All Christians will always be a mixture of weeds and wheat. The important thing is the sower is God. The sower is God. You remember the old hymn that says, we plow the field and scatter the good seed on the ground, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. The sower is God. This is the reason why I say, I think we're thankful for this gift because we believe that the giver is God, not Spain. It is God through Spain or through the Spaniards who came here. We're not necessarily coming with all the purest of intentions and motives, but they were just human beings like you and me. And it was on the fertile ground of plain goodwill. Nung nagpakatao sila at nakipagkapwa-tao sila, they were able to strike a dialogue and an exchange of goodwill. So following the parable of the weeds and the wheat in Matthew chapter 13, I'd like to propose that we are not the seeds, we are the field. We are the field. Because if we think of people as weeds and wheat, ay nako, you will say some people are innately good and some people are innately bad. Now, we don't think like that in Christianity. I think the parable of the weeds and the wheat is actually a parable of the ground, of the field. It is the same field that is planted with wheat and weeds. And it is like that. It is always like that in every period of history of Christianity. The fields are sown not always with seeds, but with wheat, but also with weeds. We are the field. Ibig sabihin nun, on earth we will always be sown with a mix of wheat from God and weeds from the evil one. Well, no problem. We leave the harvesting to God. Let me end now. My conclusion, 500 years later. Sorry, I've gone a bit over time. No, I know you gave me only an hour, but masyadong vast itong ating topic, so I had to adjust a little bit. Now, the conclusion. 500 years later, here we are. Gifted to give, And we're trying to define our mission. Lalo na the final year of preparation for 2021 is called a year of mission. And we're asking ourselves, with this precious gift that we have received, the gift of the Christian faith, how do we share this gift? The mission to share as gift the very faith that we receive from God as gift. What is this mission about? I think it is important. It is important for us to say to ourselves, to define what this mission is about. The mission is to share the good news, to evangelize. So to evangelize doesn't mean to proselytize, To evangelize doesn't mean to force your religion on other people, To evangelize is to share the gift that we have received. And what is that gift? It is the gift of the good news of the kingdom of God. And, of course, the next question is, what is that good news? It is the good news of Jesus. And that good news of Jesus is, we are all called to to be sons and daughters of God. And if we are called to be all sons and daughters of God, meaning we're called to be brothers and sisters to one another. We're not called to be slaves and masters to one another. We're called to be brothers and sisters to one another. And so, I think that became very clear, very, very clear to the natives, that the colonists who were behaving like masters and who were treating the natives like slaves were not of the same mindset as these people who were bringing faith in Jesus Christ, who is proclaiming a totally new kind of world, which he calls the kingdom of God, and which he proclaims as good news. And the good news is we are all heirs of the kingdom of God, being a family, being family to all human beings, fellow human beings, and to all fellow creatures. I think the natives of this country began to truly appreciate, this faith, the beauty of the Christian faith. The challenge to live life on earth as it is in heaven. And when does earth become like heaven? Well, when we treat the earth as our common home, when we treat every fellow human being, every fellow creature, as a member of God's family. Let me end with this, We treasure Christian faith as a gift. And this gift is lived. The gift of Christian life. We are the bearers of a gift. St. Paul says, we hold a treasure in earthen vessels to make it clear to us that its surpassing power comes from God and not from us. Inevitably, Christian life is always a tension. A tension between, on the one hand, our old and our flawed and sinful humanity as sons and daughters of Adam, fallen humanity. But on the other hand, Christianity is also about our new, graced, and redeemed humanity as sons and daughters of God in the risen Christ. Every bearer of good news is always a mix of the two. Kahit tayo, even we now, in 2021, we are bearers of this precious gift. We hold this treasure, but this treasure we possess in our own earthenness. Sampu ng lahat ng ating mga pagkukulang, pagkakamali, pagkakasala. The church will always be a church of saints and sinners. The church will always be a combination of holiness and wretchedness. But don't despair. We plow the fields and scatter the good seed on the ground, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. We are the field, God is the sower, and we are grateful for the seeds that are thriving, that have grown, that are bearing fruit, and that now have to be shared to all humankind. So this is Bishop Ambo David, Bishop of the Diocese of Calooc, and it has been a pleasure sharing with you on the topic, Gifted to Give, 500th Year of Christianity. Thank you.